Just to let everybody know, Market Hardware is a web marketing firm that specializes in working with PHCC members as well as other service providers, and we've been working with PHCC for about 8 to 9 years now. So we're very familiar with the association as well as its members, and what we really try to do on these calls, as well as when we perform consultations here, is provide as much educational value as we can so that folks can make informed decisions about what is best for their business. The folks from our team who are going to be on the call today are Matt Horn, who's the head of our SEO team over here at Market Hardware, sharing a lot of the behind-the-scenes secrets of what it takes to be successful on Google these days. We've got the Director of Marketing, Alon Parkin, who is going to be really kind of spearheading our talk today. And one thing we really want to encourage today, folks, is for you to ask as many questions as you'd like using the webinar software, as the director of our social media team, Rebecca Hussey, is going to be answering those questions along the way. And before we jump in, one other thing to let you know is we're going to be at the PHCC conference on September 30th in Hollywood, and we'll be in the PHCC booth itself performing consultations. Matt and Alon will be there, and they're really looking forward to meeting as many members as they can. Additionally, as Wayne mentioned, we'll be sending out this presentation, or Wayne will be taking care of that after the call, but we do encourage questions, and we're really excited to be here today. Without further ado, Alon, take it over.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, PHCC, for letting us do this presentation. I'm especially excited about this because, like Doug said, I run the marketing department here at Market Hardware, so this is something that I spend a lot of my time thinking about, is figuring out how much of our marketing dollars to invest in retaining clients versus acquiring new clients. So what we're really going to be talking about today is some of the common strategies when it comes to retaining versus acquiring clients, especially in the plumbing, heating, and cooling industry. There's a lot of tools at your disposal, and we've talked about a lot of those over the last couple of years. We gave a great presentation last year at the PHCC Connect conference about SEO specifically. It's the kind of stuff that we see firsthand all day long, really making a difference in a lot of the clients that we work with, both those acquisition strategies and retention strategies. And really, when you boil it down to the basics, what we're talking about is the fact that it's been shown that retaining clients is actually a lot cheaper than acquiring new clients. But of course, the dilemma that a lot of businesses face is, without a large enough existing client base, then is there anyone to retain? So what our goal for the conversation today is to figure out what's the right balance of spending those marketing dollars on retaining clients or acquiring clients, because you still have to invest some amount of your marketing budget in order to acquire those clients, but then hopefully we want to get you to the point that you can move some of those funds over into a retention plan in order to keep a very stable client flow. So when we talk about some of the major players when it comes to acquisition versus retention, this is really what we're going to be talking about. We're going to focus in on a couple of these today, which we'll get into momentarily. When it comes to acquiring clients, word-of-mouth marketing is obviously a great tool. You want your existing clients to tell their friends and family about your services so that hopefully more folks end up calling you. But the one that you can really have a big impact on is SEO and PPC. Those are ones that you can have a lot of control in, you can put money into, and you can really see a good ROI from that, and you can hopefully track as much of that ROI as possible, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And then when it comes to retention, really social media and email newsletters are the two key players, and we're going to be focusing on email newsletters, and we'll give you a bunch of examples about some ways to do that. When it comes to loyalty and repeat business, it's another great strategy, but again, it doesn't have quite as much ROI as email newsletters and social media, so we'll explain why that is in a bit. So circling back to SEO and PPC, Doug's going to walk us through this search result landscape here and explain how those strategies come into play.
Thanks, Alon. And folks, before we dig into all the specifics about what it takes to acquire customers, it's important that we understand the search engine landscape itself. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call have seen a slide like this and knows exactly what a Google results page looks like. But it's important that we identify exactly the areas of a typical Google results page that we need to target, or you as a business owner need to target in order to be successful. So as we look at this slide, Section A is what we refer to as the maps or the local results. For those who do a lot of searching on Google, you may have noticed that over the past couple weeks in particular, Google has significantly reduced the number of results they're typically displaying in the map section for any search that's done. For the past couple years, sometimes there would be 7 results, sometimes there would be 10. But on a pretty consistent basis now, we're only seeing about 2 to 3 results showing. What that means is that there's a lot less real estate to work with in the map section, but there's a lot more real estate, or it makes the organic and paid ad sections even more important. So speaking of the paid ad section, section B here are what we call the paid or the pay-per-click results. So in these results, this is exactly where, as many of you I'm sure on this call have done before, you are directly paying for that placement from Google. It's the fastest way to get guaranteed placement on page 1, but of course the cost associated with it, depending on your market, can sometimes be pretty high. And of course, when we look at section C, this is what we are starting to consider the most important long-term section on Google, which are the organic or natural results. You can't buy this placement, folks. You can't rent it. You have to earn this placement by becoming the most relevant result for a particular search phrase in your own market.
So we're going to talk about how different those different services or those different areas, or how you can target those different areas. And really, the pay-per-click ends up applying to the paid search results, and Doug's going to give us a run-through on that. And the organic results really talks about SEO with a little bit of the local and map results. That's how those are connected, and Matt's going to give us a great run-through about those in a bit. But before we get there, we want to talk about why search engines care who shows up. You know, why don't they just show whichever companies they want? And the reason that search engines, specifically Google, because as we've seen, they get the majority of search traffic, the reasons they care who shows up highest is because they have so many folks using it every single day. The latest stat that we found was that Google averages 3.5 trillion search queries per day. And with so many folks searching on Google all the time, they really care about who shows up highest. Otherwise, less people would search it and people would look elsewhere for that information. But we're at this current dynamic right now where a lot of folks are using Google. They're happy with the results they're getting because they're getting reliable, credible businesses. They're calling those businesses and they end up being happy with their service, which ultimately makes Google happy. So you kind of have this whole cycle where Google continues to invest resources in getting good results, and the top results end up spending those resources to show up there. So looking at it from the perspective of the business owner and all the folks on the call, your goal should be to make your website the most relevant result for the top searches, and this applies to you targeting the paid search, the maps, or the organic section. You want to be as high as possible for those popular searches, which we're going to hear about in a bit. So as an example, heating repair in your local town and the towns around you. You want to be at the top of that list, and conveniently, search engines want to match you with those local requests. The good news for everybody on the call is a PHCC member is that PHCC members are typically some of the top businesses in their industry. So those are the folks that Google wants to list at the top. So you kind of already have a leg up on some of your competition just based on that. Now we just need to figure out how to signal to Google that you are a PHC business, that you are tops in your industry. So with that said, Doug, let's jump into the paid search advertising. Give us a walkthrough, because there's a little bit of a caveat here, which means that Google's not necessarily showing exactly the most relevant businesses. There's a little bit more to it. So tell us about paid search advertising.
Yeah, so folks, when it comes to showing up in the paid ad section, you know, as we state in this slide, many of you already know, this is the 21st century version of the Yellow Pages. The results that are shown, if somebody is in position 1 of the ads versus position 3, let's say, it doesn't mean that the person in position 1 is more relevant, and we keep using that term, folks, because that refers more to the organic results. And to be very clear, we will talk more later about how you become relevant when Matt comes on the call. But the paid ad section is much more about not just what you're spending, it also has to do with how your ads are written and structured. There are certain words that you want to use and certain words that you can't use. Like free, for example, often can affect how your ad performs. Additionally, the quality of your website is a major factor in how you may rank against your competition or how you list in the results when a certain search is done if you, for example, have the same budget as your competitor. So the quality of your site does matter when converting here. as many of you have probably done at some point over the years, you may know that paid search, is based specifically off of keywords and key phrases. The biggest thing you want to do here is bid on as many of them that are relevant to your business as possible. That's one of the biggest advantages of paid search advertising is there's almost no limit on the number of keywords that you can bid on. You just want to make sure you're always bidding on the keywords that are the best fit for your business. Additionally, some of the benefits that come with this have a lot to do with the platform that you use to run your paid search advertising campaign. So when I say paid search, folks, I'm referring to Google AdWords, pay-per-click marketing, and SEM marketing. All of these are really the same thing. It just depends on the approach that you take. A lot of folks use the words AdWords to describe their pay-per-click campaign, but in fact, AdWords is just Google's platform that you use to run your campaign. It doesn't really have anything to do with, the AdWords itself doesn't actually have call tracking, for example. So as you're looking at this slide, you'll see that the most effective pay-per-click campaigns include call tracking and call recording, because if you don't know exactly what you're getting for every dollar you're spending, you're going to have a very difficult time assessing your return on investment. It is important to note that not all pay-per-click providers are created equal. You need to find a provider out there, if you can't manage this yourself, of course, who not only understands your business, but right-sizes your budget for the market that you're in. One of the biggest things that I hear, folks, are they've run paid search a lot, and I talk to a lot of PHCC members about this, but they've run paid search many times before. It hasn't been successful for them. A lot of times it's because their budget is not aligned properly for their market. The best way to make sure that your budget is properly aligned for your market is to make sure that you understand exactly how many people are in that target area, and then have somebody recommend a budget that allows you to compete effectively in that market.
So Doug, you talked a little bit about budget, and I want to ask you a question about how much it costs every time you get some of those clicks. So you're having consultations with PHCC members and really folks in the plumbing and heating business all day long, in my opinion, as much as anybody out there. So when you're having these conversations and folks call you, sometimes they want to know, well, how much do I have to pay every time I get those clicks? Or, of my budget, how many clicks am I getting? How many, visits to my website am I getting? What should they really be looking at the end of the day? Maybe tell us a little bit about how much those clicks might cost.
Yeah, Alon, I'm really glad you brought that up, because an effective pay-per-click campaign is a lot more about your cost per lead than it is about your cost per click. Okay, folks, a lot of the folks I talk to tell me they may spend $5 a click or $8 a click. But at the end of the day, I think we all know those clicks don't mean a whole lot if they're not turning into direct phone calls or emails from the campaign. The average cost per lead for the folks on this call, it really depends, again, on where you're located. Obviously, folks in bigger metropolitan areas are going to have to spend more due to the higher level of competition. But the average cost per lead, again, that's a direct call or email from your campaign, can run anywhere between $35 and $50 on average. So if you have a campaign that's doing better than that, terrific. Make sure that you keep it going. If you're doing worse than that, you may need somebody to take a look at your budget or the group that's managing the campaign itself.
So one of my favorite things to do during these webinars is to talk about the pros and cons of the different services that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to do that with PPC, SEO, and email marketing. So Doug, I'm going to get you one last question before we start talking about SEO. If you could give us one pro and one con for paid search advertising, what would it be?
So I think the biggest pro is absolutely the call tracking and recording. When there are very few types of marketing out there where you can get a true return on investment figure, but when you do pay-per-click effectively and you have that tracking and recording, and of course you listen to those calls, as we all know it can be time consuming, you can get a true estimate of what the sales value was for the pay-per-click campaign you had. So the tracking and recording is really optimal. I think one of the negatives can be that it's more of a short to medium term goal. Pay-per-click is very effective when run properly, but there are no long-term benefits, meaning the day you stop it is the day you lose that placement. And so for a lot of folks, they may not remember if they've been running for many years, but if they were to stop that campaign, they would lose that placement. And to be very clear, folks, any pay-per-click campaign you run has no influence on an SEO campaign that you're running. So the two are not associated with each other.
All right, awesome. So Matt, hopefully you're going to be able to give us a pro and con about SEO, and hopefully we'll be able to compare and contrast those two great acquisition strategies. So let's change gears and let's talk about a little about SEO. So Matt, you oversee a couple dozen, if not, I guess close to 100 about now, plumbing and heating SEO campaigns, and this is basically what you would qualify as the basics, advanced, and top of the line when it comes to doing SEO campaigns in that industry. Will you walk us through those and explain why it's different and why it's important to figure out what's the right strategy for the folks on the line?
Sure, thanks, Alon. This slide right here is kind of a setup for what we're going to dive into over the next handful of slides, but I think it's really important to get this out there and let everybody see that there are different levels of SEO based on what it is you're looking for, where you're located, a lot of the similar factors that even go into a pay-per-click campaign. The biggest thing is no matter what level you use, whether it's the most basic level, the middle one, top of the line, the company that's performing SEO for you has to have access to your website. If they don't have access to your website, then they aren't performing the most basic strategies, the most basic optimization strategies, which every company needs to have in order to be successful. So make sure that they have access to the site, and then you can tell with the basics, a lot of on-site work. You move to the advanced, you start incorporating some off-site work. You move to the top of the line, and then you have on-site, off-site, and then you're obviously including some social media strategies as well, really trying to tie everything together.
So this is really important. I don't want to cut you off too much, Matt, but I want to make sure that if anybody has any questions about this or about anything moving forward, they ask that, because we're really going to kind of glaze over SEO when you think that we're only going to be spending about 15 or 20 minutes talking about it, and it's a topic that we've given our 2-hour-long presentations on before. So from our perspective, we're going to shoot through this pretty quickly. If anybody has questions, I'd really, really encourage them to ask. So Matt, I'll let you continue and talk about these 2 bullet points that we have in the bottom left and upper right here before we really talk about how you do SEO.
Sure. So once again, just make sure they've got access to the website. That's the one thing I cannot stress enough. And then as we're going to move forward here, I'm actually going to go ahead to the next slide. That top right box said the combination of internal and external factors. We're going to dive into some of the internal right now. And so this slide here, we're going to cover a lot of different things. Alon and I'll probably go back and forth a little bit. But the first step when starting an SEO campaign is you got to figure out what it is you want to target. You need to figure out what your key phrases are going to be before you start any optimization whatsoever on the website. So determining the key phrases, you really want to pick the top services combined with your top service areas. Everybody in here is going to be doing, plumbing, plumbers. That's a search term that gets a ton of search volume, and in order to be successful in the game, you got to have some presence for those different search terms. If some people make a ton of money or do really, really well, the drain cleaning aspect or whatever it may be, if you have a top service, you want to make sure those are in your key phrases matched up with your top service areas. So a very popular one would be plumbing, Bethesda, Maryland, which is where we're located out of and doing this webinar right now for you guys. That's going to be a very popular search term that generally everybody wants to show up for. So once you gather your different key phrases, your different search terms, then you need to start your optimization efforts and try to figure out, where do I put these? Once I gather my key phrases, you need to spread these strategically throughout the website. There's a handful of different areas in the site and also behind the scenes of the site, which we're going to show you some examples of what that is. But you need to start placing these key phrases throughout the site. The biggest thing is that if you're not letting Google know what it is that you want to show up for or that you're relevant for, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot and not going about it in the right way. You need to make sure within the title tags, the header tags, Google understands exactly what it is you're relevant for in order to help you show up there.
So, Matt, as we head toward the winter, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the most commonly searched for heating phrases, or maybe plumbing. I don't know if that's to do with, drain pipe repair, frozen pipes, whatever it might be. But tell us about some of those and how you came to figure out that those are the most commonly searched phrases.
Sure. So as we do move forward, for example, frozen pipes may be a great term to go after just because that's the time of the year. The biggest thing is that there is some seasonal effects that go into determining your key phrases. And the biggest thing is we've done SEO for a very long time, so we've seen firsthand which key phrases seem to work. But also Google will give us some information, and they'll actually give you the search volume for different key phrases so we can tell which ones we want to try to put you in front of the larger audience. And that's where it brings to this graph over here on the right. You may be asking, well, what is short, medium, or long-tailed? What's that mean? A short-tailed key phrase is the ones that a couple examples that I've just given: plumbing, Bethesda; frozen pipes, Bethesda; drain cleaning, Bethesda. That's going to get you a ton of search volume, and that'll give you probably about half the searches that are out there. But there are people that do these medium and long-tailed searches. An example of a medium, would be a leaking toilet in my bathroom. An example of a long-tailed would be how to fix the sink that won't stop leaking upstairs. I know you may be laughing, but some people do actually search that way, including Rebecca, who's pointing to herself right now. If you go after a wider range of keywords, you can see how this graph starts to grow. So you hit your short-tailed, your medium-tailed, your long-tailed. You're casting a net over a wider range of people that are doing searches out there, and you're trying to get yourself in front of a larger audience. So a lot of companies will always go after these short-tailed, which is fantastic, but if you're not incorporating some of these longer-tailed ones, you may be missing out on some of the searches.
And this graph gives such a good representation of that, because if you think about it, that 50% of search traffic that you're missing out on, that's really going to your competition. So if you're not trying to incorporate some of those medium and long-tailed key phrases, then you're missing out on a lot of business that's out there that's really looking for those services. So Matt, let's give everybody some examples of those header and title tags here on the next slide. So walk us through what are the header tags, what are the title tags, and kind of show us what it looks like in the HTML and what it looks like on the actual website.
All right, so this now is where it starts to get a little confusing and a little tricky trying to understand, well, what is it that exactly Google is looking at here? So at the very top, you're going to see just a given search. Somebody goes on, they do heating service in Burke, a company pops up. The very top there, heating service repair, followed by Burke, and then followed by the company name. That's called the title tag of this page. If you look in the box below that, you'll see the one that has all the gray markings underneath. Right above it, that's the title tag. So you're actually putting these key phrases in the title of the page. Now this is going to help you because when Google is crawling your website, they're not necessarily looking at it the same way you and I are. We can see a great layout. I can see some buttons, see some phone numbers, see some photos. But Google is actually looking behind the scenes of the website and determining what people are relevant for based on what you have in your different title tags. And also, if you look to the right, that's an H1 tag, and below you can see that's highlighted in yellow as well on the website. Now you may just think, oh, that's just kind of the header of the page. It's a little bit bigger so people understand. But Google actually is weighing that more than the content below it. They're picking up for certain areas on the site. If you're not incorporating these keywords in, you're really missing out. You have to help Google help you understand what it is that you want to show up for.
So let me ask you something, Matt. If somebody wanted to target a specific city and they didn't put that city in their title tag and H1 tag, is it possible that they could still show up for that city, or how hard would it be?
It is possible for them to show up, but probably in a really small market where there's not a lot of competition. As we're moving forward, everybody's turning online, everybody's going to Google, doing various searches in order to be relevant, in order to try to stay on page one. If you think about it, every time you do a search on Google, you see page one out of about 940,000 results. So you have 10 people fighting for that spot on page one. You may show up in the short term without having your city in there, but in the long run, I guarantee you're going to fall off. So just make sure you're upfront about it. Get these cities, get these key phrases in the correct places of the website, because once again, if Google can't see it, then they have no idea what you're all about.
And one other thing I want to emphasize really quickly before we move on to the next slide is that this is really important to remember, is that Google is looking at that code on the back end. It's not a bunch of folks who are sitting in an office scanning through websites and saying, okay, well, if these guys do heating repair, then they must repair furnaces. If you don't have the word furnace on your website, on the code somewhere, they're not going to know that you do those services. They can't just make assumptions about it. Same sort of deal, if you show that you serve all of Montgomery County, that doesn't mean that you're going to show up for all the counties that are in Montgomery County. You have to find ways to signal to Google that you show up for those. I'm going to use one of your lines, Matt. You want to help Google help you, right? So with that said, now that we've seen what SEO really looks like, let's take a look at what SEO does not actually look like, and tell us about some of these tactics that folks have used here.
So we just gave you a whole bunch of great ideas. Now we're going to give you a whole bunch of bad ideas. So if you see this or you're working with somebody, unfortunately, who may be using some of these tactics, may have to take a step back and figure out your plan moving forward. The top box here, and it may be very difficult to see on some computers, there's a reason behind that I'm going to get to in a minute. This is what's called these doorway or landing, hidden landing pages. Some companies, what they'll try to do is set up a whole bunch of specific pages directed towards one certain city. So you can see here there's about 25, 30 different cities underneath plumbing and HVAC. And what some people will think is, well, if I have a page dedicated 100% to that city, then Google knows that I'm relevant in that city. Well, unfortunately, this is cheating the system, because having all these pages with duplicate content, Google's not going to see that you're relevant there, and they can actually hurt you for that. Also, notice it's a little bit difficult to read, and what they're trying to do is they don't really want this to have, when somebody reaches their website, to have them kind of navigate and see it. They're trying to make it hidden at the bottom, but strictly for the search engine's purpose. And Google doesn't like that. They need everything that can be found and easily accessible through on the website itself. So don't just think if you set up about 50 or 60 different pages dedicated towards a city that that's going to help out, especially with duplicate content, because Google can come crack down and actually penalize you for that. And then if you look below, you'll see this wonderfully written paragraph, and it basically is repeating itself the entire time. And some people will think, well, hey, if I have all my key phrases in there about 5 or 6 times, then Google's got to be able to pick me up for that. This all has to be done within limits. You can't just go on and dump in a ton of keywords, or that's called keyword stuffing. Google will actually penalize you for that. So there are restrictions on what you can and can't do. If you think you're overdoing it, you probably are. So take a step back and figure out where in a couple of different places on the website, on each page, you can strategically place these different key phrases.
So this is exactly what we're talking about with keyword density, right? Not too much, not too little. You kind of have to figure out what's the right amount. And this paragraph at the bottom here is obviously way too much, and it seems like these folks are just really a little bit obsessed with their homemade cooling machines. It's not very user-friendly, and Google's going to pick up on that, and they're probably not going to rank very highly for that. So Matt, with these cities, one of the other things that we see pretty often is folks who list a whole block of zip codes at the bottom of their website to try to show up for those. Is that something that works, or is that something that just really doesn't have an effect?
Really doesn't have an effect. A lot of times we'll see people will try to dump in like 50 zip codes at the very bottom, or they'll try to put in like 100 different cities at the very bottom. Once again, keyword stuffing. And that's something Google will penalize you for. It's okay if you put in there, you know, the top 20 different cities that you service, and you have a different service page for that. You know, that's okay. We're not telling you that you can't put your different cities on the website. But if you're trying to overdo it, or we have seen a few sites, as Alon mentioned, at the very bottom, just lines and lines of zip codes and cities and everything, that's overdoing it, and unfortunately you will get penalized for that.
And the last question that I want to ask before we move on is, you know, why is it important? Are folks more likely to do searches for services based on cities, or are they more likely to do them based on counties or zip codes? What have you seen is really the most common search?
We've seen firsthand cities is the best way to approach it. There are some outliers for people in counties where, you know, the county is just so big and there aren't many cities in it, and nobody searches by that really small town. That's when it's okay. But zip codes, we don't see a lot of people searching that way. If you're showing up for a city, Google's generally smart enough to know, okay, the zip code's in this city, you're going to show up for that as well. So city is typically the way to go, especially in a major market. You really want to try to zone in on that specific city.
Awesome. All right. So now that we have all those on-site SEO strategies discussed, let's move on to some of those off-site optimization strategies. What are we talking about when it comes to off-site optimization?
So real quick, I'm going to take a step back. For this slide, I want to first say all of this off-site, we're going to talk about building backlinks and inbound links. So what is a backlink? That is a link from one page to another page, and the person receiving the link is getting a vote of confidence from Google. I have my website, Alon has his website. I have a link to Alon's website. Alon is getting the benefit from Google by having a relevant inbound link coming over to his website. So now as we move forward, we're going to give you guys some examples All right, so I understand what an inbound link is, so how do I get these, or where do I even go for these? The one thing I cannot stress enough on this slide is that these links have to be coming from relevant sources. Relevant sources are blogs, news articles, Yelp, Better Business Bureau, trade associations. These are unique, relevant websites that are out there on the web. These are where you're going to gain by getting inbound links from. These are the one that Google has already seen is a trustworthy website. We need to be a little bit shady. Sometimes people will think, oh, well, if I get 50 links, then I'm getting a lot more, and that's going to be great, right? But they don't know where these links are coming from. There are these link farms that are out there. So if you're getting 50 links from some random database in North Korea with no substance behind the link, you're not doing yourself any good, and Google will actually penalize you for that. So the biggest thing to take away from this slide is it's not the quantity of the links, it's the quality of the links.
Let's talk about blogs really quickly because I want to focus in on those, and that's something that, you know, a couple of years ago the strategy when it came to blogs was really different than what the strategy is today. What a lot of folks did 5, 6, 7 years ago was they would go out to blogs online and they would post comments on there, and within those comments they'd link back to their website. And for a while Google was picking up on those links and ranking businesses a little bit higher because of it. That's not necessarily the case anymore. So maybe you can tell us about a better blog strategy that actually works in 2015.
So exactly, those kind of comment ones almost came across as spam coming in, because if you just comment and say, looks great, and then you have a link there linking to some website that probably doesn't have anything to do with the blog topic, Google started picking up on that. When we're talking about blogs, typically we're talking about blogs on the site or blogs off-site linking back to your website. And so writing, a paragraph about a specific topic. So earlier in the discussion, we were talking about these medium and long-tailed key phrases, and you may be saying, well, where should I filter those key phrases in? You guys said I can't plug 100 into the title tag. This is a great example and a great way of doing that. You set up a blog, you talk about a topic, and you said the winter is coming and my pipes, burst for whatever reason. You have a specific key phrase linking back to your website. You're going to be getting a boost of confidence because you have that link, that inbound link from a relevant source. So it's not the days where you can just go out, set up a blog, write one sentence, and link back. There needs to be some substance behind it. Once again, some relevant, unique content linking back to your site. That's where you're getting the thumbs up from Google.
All right, awesome. So this statistic here at the bottom really, and it's true, there's so many website links out there that are just so obviously spam, and search engines like Google go to such great lengths to try to rid those out of their system and not take them into account when ranking relevancy of websites. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of SEO companies that haven't kept up with web trends who are still utilizing those messages. And I really shouldn't say just SEO companies, because a lot of folks who are doing SEO on their own are still using some of these older strategies. So for anybody on the line who goes and does some research on their own to try to figure out how to do SEO, make sure you check the date on the article to make sure that you're using a method or strategy that's still relevant in 2015. Like Matt said, coming up with educational, professional content is a really, really good way to get credible inbound links to your website, especially if you're sending it to the right folks. Doug, let's talk a little bit about how those other SEO companies occasionally steer folks wrong. So walk us through these 3 common mistakes that are made.
Yeah, so Matt has done a great job explaining what goes into the on-site and off-site elements of an effective SEO strategy, but far too often I speak to PHCC members who have companies doing just one or just the other. It's very important, folks, that in order to be successful, not just short and medium term, but more specifically long term, any effective SEO strategy has to have on-site elements and off-site elements. One is just not going to do the job. Additionally, a big thing that I hear is, I've got somebody doing SEO for me, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing, but they say they send my business information out there to a lot of the different search engines. Folks, that is not SEO. It's very important to understand exactly what your providers are doing for you, because if you don't, sometimes it can be just like throwing good money after bad. We call those listing submissions or directory submissions. There are many online directories on the web, and while it's important to have correct business information out there, the act of submitting your business information to these directories is not an on-site or a strong off-site strategy. So we recommend that you make sure you understand exactly what your provider is doing. One thing to note is that if what you're spending on SEO sounds too good to be true, folks, it probably is. So if you are currently working with somebody on an SEO strategy and you're not sure what they're doing, when we hop off the call today, give them a quick ring and see what you can figure out about what they've done over the past 60 to 90 days for you. And of course, perhaps one of the most important elements of a poor SEO strategy is using black hat tactics. Black hat tactics are, as Matt touched on a lot before, not Google approved tactics for implementing SEO. So anything that basically guarantees quick results or includes link farming or any other strategy keyword stuffing that's not approved by Google is considered a black hat tactic. It may give you short-term results, but in the long term, the risk is that Google is going to catch up with you. It's important for all of us to remember, folks, Google is smarter than all of us, so it's our job to keep up with them as best as we can and make sure that we play by their rules when it comes to the search engines.
And we just got a great question. Somebody wants to know what some black hat SEO tactics are and how they can figure out whether their SEO provider is doing those. Doug, I'm gonna let you answer that because that's a question that I know comes up really often when you're having consultations with folks. Is they want to know what their current SEO provider is doing because sometimes they're not sure, but sometimes or most of the time you're able to look and see. So can you tell us about some of those black hat SEO tactics? How can people figure out whether their SEO company has used those?
Yeah, it's really important that folks understand this because I'm sure a lot of folks are scratching their heads wondering. So one of the most obvious ones are multiple websites. Folks, if you've got a website out there, you want to send 100% of your online traffic through that website. If you're working with an SEO provider and they say they're going to build you a separate landing page or an additional website that's going to help shoot you up in the rankings, that is not at all what Google wants you to do. So make sure that any SEO strategies they have, as Matt said earlier, they are directly doing on the site that you control. Another tactic we hear a lot about are duplicate content or duplicate pages. So this was also touched on earlier, but it's something that's happening more and more these days. Companies out there are creating city-specific pages on your website, but when they use duplicate content to do that, the long-term risk is significant. So make sure you know exactly what they're using on your site.
So basically what that means is a lot of folks are going into the heating repair site, for example, and then doing, I'm going to list a couple of cities around here. They're taking the content on the heating repair site and then they're doing a heating repair Rockville and then a heating repair Germantown and a heating repair Gaithersburg page, but taking the exact same content or even just changing it a little bit. And that's not enough. You need unique content that's really specific to those cities on there, and you need to figure out other ways to incorporate those cities into your content. That's why those off-site factors that Matt talked about are really, really useful. So Doug, let's give them a little bit of good news. Let's talk about these 3 strategies that Google wants folks to use today in order to show up a little bit higher. Can you tell us about these 3?
Yeah, so folks, it's time for everybody to pull out a pen and a piece of paper because we're going to be taking some notes on this slide. These are 3 tactics that everybody can use as soon as we get off this call today. After we get off the call, folks, I want everybody on this webinar to go to their website and check and make sure they have a link going to the PHCC website. There is probably no more relevant link than you could have on your website than a link to your primary trade association's website. PHCC's site is full of relevant content. It's incredibly relevant, and it's professional as well. So you got to make sure that you're linking to your association. Additionally, folks, there are if you belong to other trade associations or perhaps a local chamber of commerce, those are also really effective links that you can have going from your site to those other sites. Another great strategy is if you have a testimonials page, make sure that you are putting the city behind the name of the person who provided the testimonial to you. If you're trying to show up in towns or cities and you're having a tough time, implementing this strategy over the period of a couple months can actually help improve your rankings in those towns or cities. So if you do have a testimonials page, go ahead and add the city in which the client lives in order to help you get better rankings there. And last, but certainly not least, we've got to make sure that your website is mobile friendly. If you're not sure, folks, if you go to Google right now, you can type in Google Mobile Test Tool, and there is a link that will take you directly to a page where you can put your website address in there, and it will tell you if your website is mobile friendly. As Google basically came out in April of this year and said, if you don't have a mobile-friendly version of your website, it can hurt you in search results on mobile devices. So as we all know, everybody's on their phone pretty much 24/7 these days, especially the younger generation. So it's really important that you make sure your site is mobile-friendly so you're not missing out on opportunities.
I'm going to actually take that second one a step further, too. Not only can you include testimonials on there, but any testimonials that you get that even reference your services, look, that alone isn't going to be enough to get you to show up for, again, heating service, AC service. But the more references you have to those things throughout your site, within reason, the better. Obviously we don't want to do what that example was earlier where it's listed 8 times in one paragraph. But if you have a testimonial that mentions those services, it might be a tiny bit better. It might move you up a tiny bit. Maybe it moves you from page 4 to page 3 for that keyword. So we're really talking about taking all those factors and putting them together into an SEO strategy. Let's take a second to kind of recap where we're at, because that basically sums up acquisition. And so we want to confirm. So far we've talked about PPC and SEO as the 2 main acquisition strategies. That's what you want to use to build your client base. And this is as good a time as any to remind everybody on the call. We do provide these services, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses out there, and I'm sure a lot of those folks are calling you about SEO services already. But there's so many businesses out there that can do SEO and PPC for you. We're not here to tell you that we're the best ones and that you have to work with us, although of course we'd love to. But we're here to help you figure out what's the right balance of those strategies and which ones do you want to use in order to help grow your client base this year and next year. So you want to take some combination of those 2 services in order to build your client base, and that's why it's important to have a consultation afterwards so you can figure out which one is better for you. You want to take those services and build your client base to a sustainable level so that you can use an email marketing plan, which is what's going to go in this center box. You're going to use that email marketing plan to get in front of those folks on a consistent basis. It's really important in the plumbing and heating industry that folks who use you continue to use you. Just by signing up a client with PPC and SEO and getting them in the door and then getting the right retention plan in front of them, you might be able to keep this client for 15, 20, 25 years, if not longer, with the right strategy. So suddenly that acquisition strategy can be even greater thanks to email marketing. And the right balance of those, what we're going to be talking about, is that's what's going to get you web success this year and next year. And that's what we're hoping that we can help you out with. So let's talk a little bit about email marketing, which is the main customer retention strategy. So when we're talking about email marketing, we're not talking about the emails that we all get all the time that are, full of exclamation points and capital letters telling you about this free new deal. Sometimes maybe they're talking about medical or herbal supplements. Whatever it might be, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is putting educational content in front of your readers that they really will appreciate and enjoy reading through. It's not going to be sent weekly, daily, more than once a day. We're going to be sending these emails out once a month, if not just once a quarter, or even less. But it is really important to stay in front of your readers and make sure that they remember you so that when they have another leak or they have another heating or AC problem, they end up calling you. So what we're going to do with email marketing is we're going to take a list of names, we're going to upload them to an email marketing platform, and then we're going to add content and mail them educational and promotional information. Now, again, we've said this a few times, but finding the right balance is really the most important factor to this. We want to send about 90% educational information and 10% promotional information. We're going to give you a couple of examples of those in a couple of slides, what that content looks like. But as long as you maintain that right balance and actually send them interesting content that they'll enjoy reading, you're going to be able to keep them opening those emails and following up with you when they need those services. So now that we know what email marketing is, I'm going to turn it back over to Doug, who's going to talk about why email marketing is so important. So Doug, tell us these 4 factors that make email marketing such a great tool.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I talk to a lot of PHCC members about are the costs associated with marketing. One of, if not the best component of email marketing is it's really, really cheap, folks. Far cheaper than running, a direct mail campaign or a local print, radio, or television ad. So, because it's so cheap and you're able to reach such a wide audience without a lot of effort, it really is a type of marketing effort that doesn't take a ton of your time. Additionally, it's highly trackable. You can see who opened your emails. You can see how they interacted with the emails. There's something really refreshing about being able to know that a certain email address associated with a client of yours opened a particular email, and you can use that information to effectively market to them down the road as well. It happens very, very quickly. As soon as you hit send or schedule that email, it's going to go out right on time. So if you need to get an email out to your clients about an emergency situation in your local town or city, having their addresses available to do that makes it really easy for you to reach them as soon as possible. And of course, the personalization aspect of it. You're able to use most types of email marketing software allow you to personalize the emails that you're sending out to your customers, and you can do that in a way that encourages them also to pass it along to other friends and family. So you get that 1-to-100 effect, folks. When you send an email to your clients, they pass along to friends and family, and you've just acquired a new customer via word of mouth for a heck of a lot less than you would have otherwise.
So I'm going to talk about Market Hardware for a little, and hopefully this example applies to a lot of the folks on the line. We used to send out a ton of direct mail, snail mail, whatever you want to call it, thousands and thousands of letters in the mail. And it was difficult because we would have to wait weeks for it to arrive, and we had no idea who actually opened it unless, of course, they actually ended up calling us. Email marketing actually makes it a lot easier because we put that same letter, that same content in an email, and we're able to send it out to thousands of people with a click of a button. And like you said, Doug, we're able to track who opened it, who unsubscribed, which is important to track. And then we can, of course, see who ended up calling us based on those open rates. So it's really important for all the folks who are really interested in tracking return on investment and figuring out the stats of their marketing every step of the way. It's a really, really great tool given that you're using the right platform. So with that said, let's talk about some content that you can include in that newsletter that's going to keep people interested and hopefully keep people from unsubscribing, because that's the last thing that we want to have happen. So really some of the most popular sections when it comes to newsletter content is your personal greeting. You want to obviously let everybody know who you are and what they're reading. Then you want to include some do-it-yourself industry tips. And Rebecca, who's on the line here, came up with a couple of really great ones that she writes for all of our plumbing and heating newsletter clients and social media clients. How to keep your pipes from freezing, how to unclog a drain, common causes of leaks. Content like that, you'll be surprised how many readers are willing to read through that, because it's actually something that's effective and is going to make their everyday lives easier, because the more they know about that, then they feel the easier things are going to be for them. It's also going to position yourself as an expert so that there's going to come a day when that person might have a leak that's too big to fix on their own. There's a pretty good chance that they're going to call the person that had sent them educational content about how to prevent minor leaks. So you're setting yourself up for success by getting that information in front of them. Some other great things to tell your clients about are any changes in industry news, policy changes, like if you guys have changes to financing deals, whatever it might be. Do those on a regular basis, because that's a really good way to get your message out to all of your clients. And then, of course, one of the things that we talk about with social media a lot is introducing your staff and showing photos of your facilities. This is always great because people like doing business with people they like. So the more that they know who you are, what your vans or facilities look like, the more likely they are to enlist your services when they need them. So you want to introduce yourself. Make sure that your customers know who you are. And then the last note here, which is a really important piece of it, this is a 10% promotional piece. So if you have a monthly special or a quarterly special, or we're going into the winter season and you want to remind everybody to do XYZ, this is where you want to do that. So you take that last paragraph in your email newsletter and you put a really great special or promotion on there. Your customers aren't going to feel like they're having a sale shoved down their throats, right? They're going to enjoy reading that, and the fact that you gave them all this educational content and then just put a little tidbit at the end, they're really going to appreciate that. You won't have very high unsubscribe rates, and you're going to see that your business or your repeat business is going to continue to grow over time. So, Doug, at this point, a lot of folks are probably wondering to themselves, when it comes to email marketing, is this something that I can do myself, or do I need to hire somebody's help to do it with? What are the 3 main challenges when it comes to do-it-yourself email marketing?
Yeah, so folks, I think the best way to approach this slide that we're looking at is if you can't answer yes to all of these questions, then it's important you find either somebody who works for you or someone you trust to take over your email marketing efforts. So first and foremost, you have to have time. Time is a huge component of being able to do this. That doesn't mean it's going to take you hours upon hours every month, but writing the content is just one piece. You'll also have to take the time to come up with that content. So if you can't, you definitely need to get some help. Additionally, making sure that you can fit that content into a proper design. Yes, there are systems out there or programs like Constant Contact that make it pretty easy for you to do this, but if you don't have the basic knowledge of how to use it, it's definitely time to find some help. Of course, you also need to make sure you're coming up with the content yourself. You never want to duplicate other content out there, folks. Just like SEO, it's important that your email content is relevant to your industry, but you also want to come up with fresh content for your clients every single month, because if you make it repetitive, people will unsubscribe or you'll have spam issues, and that's just not going to keep people engaged with your content.
So let's take a step back. So that was specifically email marketing, do-it-yourself versus hiring outside help. We also put together this guide to hiring any web marketing company, and this applies to SEO, PPC, email marketing. And this is what a lot of folks end up calling you about, Doug, PHCC members and non-PHCC members in that industry. What I hear sitting across from you is that they call you and they say, hey, I'm thinking about working with these guys, or I've got this person on staff who claims they can do it, and I'm really trying to figure out a way to work that into my budget. So you put together these questions which you want everybody to ask. So walk us through them and let us know why it's so important for the folks on the call to ask those possible providers these questions.
Yeah, this is a really important point, folks, and I also want to remind everybody, we internally have actually produced a document that we call our Buyer's Bill of Rights, and the purpose of that document is to arm PHCC members like yourselves with the right questions to ask anytime you're looking to hire a web marketing firm. As Alon pointed out earlier, there's a lot of good providers out there, but you need to make sure that when you're looking, you ask the right questions, and most of all, that they understand your business and set the right expectations about what they're going to deliver for what you're going to pay them. Additionally, when we look at this slide right here, you need to make sure up front that you understand whether there's a contract associated with the work they're doing or not. A lot of times with SEO, folks, we talked about this. It takes time. It requires patience. That doesn't mean that there has to be a contract in place to do it. It just means they need to explain that it's going to take time and that there's a verbal agreement up front that you will be patient as the work is performed. Additionally, you need to make sure you understand exactly what is going to be done on a monthly basis. If not, they may be using black hat tactics, or they may build your website in a way that's not search engine friendly. And once that stuff is done, it can be very hard to undo. So make sure they're clear with you about exactly what they're going to do. Understanding the industry, we think, is one of the most underrated parts of hiring any web firm out there. There's a lot of folks who can build a website or do search engine optimization, but if they don't understand the basic tenets of your industry itself, they're going to have a hard time making the adjustments they need if you're not being successful or if campaigns are underperforming. So make sure they know not just your business, but your industry. And of course, are they staying up to date on web trends? Are they paying attention to the newest Google release or update? You need to make sure that your company is not just paying attention to you, but they're paying attention to the trends that are happening out there in the search engine landscape, because the decisions they make today could affect your business 6 months, a year, or 5 years from now.
And that's such an important piece. I was just reading this article about web experts and how many folks out there claim to be web experts, which is really just a near impossible title to claim, because the way that web trends change, and when we're talking about web trends, we're talking about SEO, PPC, email marketing, website design. Those trends are all changing practically every single day. So it's so hard to stay on top of all those trends unless there's a full team of folks that are really invested in doing that. But like you and I both know, Doug, everybody's claiming to be an SEO expert or a PPC expert. So it's really important to ask those folks, how do you stay up to date on web trends? What are some of the recent changes? What do you think about responsive design, which is such a hot topic with website design right now. I want to bring Matt back on the line before we jump ahead real quick, because Matt, I know you get the question really often from your SEO clients about what makes you different, what kind of work do you do, and what sets you apart. So how would you explain those to me if I was one of your clients asking you about that?
Sure, thank you for this little bonus round towards the end. What I like to say, and I hear Doug say this all the time as well, is that when we're looking at SEO and also pay-per-click, we basically split it into 3 separate parts. A lot of companies are really, really good at 1 or 2 of these, but to be very successful, you have to be good at all 3 of these. The first part is the work, the actual work being done for the campaign, the changes to the website. Then there's the reporting side, or the analytics. Because you did the work on this, what happened? What were the results of it? What did it produce? And then there's bringing it back to the client and tying all 3 together. Being good at all 3 is you're keeping the client in with what you're doing. You're kind of showing them as you progress with the work. And it's very important to us to be keeping the client in the loop with the work that's being done and reporting on that, so that way they're comfortable.
So that about wraps things up. On behalf of Doug, Matt, and Rebecca, and of course Brian, our CEO, who unfortunately was a little too sick to do the call today, we want to give a special thank you to the PHCC Association for having us on this webinar. We really, really do appreciate our plumbing and heating businesses, and we're more than happy to provide this educational information to all of them. So we hope to see all of you in Hollywood in about 2 weeks now. I think that's right, Wayne. So I'll turn it over to you without further ado, and one last thank you again.